change is at the heart of your ability to make it happen. Welcome to Turning Inward. I'm Vivian Carrasco, your midwife, teacher, and host for this podcast. Together, you and I are going to navigate the interior life. And we're going to do that by unearthing our personal truths, our own insight, and our inner knowing. These are weekly teachings that are brought to you by hard-nosed scientific evidence, focused on spiritual direction with integrity and self-awareness. In 2 words, this is your inner work. Hello, lovelies. Today I'm with Steph. So Steph, tell us all about you.
Hello, lovelies, or as I like to say, love nuggets. Got to get that in there. My name is Steph Lagana, and I am a business strategist, and I'm also a spiritual teacher. And this is not anywhere that I thought that I would be. I assumed that I would spend maybe another 20 or 25 years in a small windowless room with very intense air conditioning, working in my old career, which was a part of the U.S. government supporting the U.S. military.
I when you said intense air conditioning, I feel your pain.
It's completely normal, V, to have a 60-degree temperature change going from outside to indoor to your workplace. It's complete. Just drop all of your preconceptions.
For me, that's like the biggest difference between a home and a building. It's like they can never get the AC right.
Oh my God. Talk about
open the windows.
Yeah, and it's such an important point for employee morale. Like, why would you insist on conditions that would ultimately lead to hypothermia? I mean, what's the I shouldn't have to wear mittens to work at my desk.
So not only will you be in a windowless room, but with intense air conditioning.
Yeah.
Steph, what made you actually turn away from that? Like this windowless room with intense air conditioning? Because one of the things that, it is, I love that we can laugh about this, but when anyone makes a significant move, it takes a lot of courage and faith. You're jumping into the abyss. And I know even for me, I forgot how painful that was. It's been so long ago. But the folks on the other end of this are listening and thinking, there's no way. I can't walk away. You're crazy. You are the crazy. I'm the normal. We don't walk away from the things we're committed to.
Yeah. It's definitely a bad kind of quit. It's the sort of quit where other people fall down because you weren't there, or at least that's the story. That definitely, there's a little bit of selective amnesia that happens too. And the other thing is that it's like this great mythos. So now, here I am, and I can totally tell this story, and it all makes sense looking backwards. And when I was in it, I was like a turtle on a trampoline with other people jumping on it that had no care for my well-being. It was going sideways. It was upside down. Nothing made sense. I was wondering why I was in so much pain, and joshing about air conditioning in a windowless environment doesn't really give credence to all of the reasons why I felt like I had to stay, in spite of my health deteriorating, in spite of morale being pretty terrible for a long period of time. There was a very exclusive group that I was a part of, and I did very important things in, all capital letters. And I really did, towards the second half of my career for multiple years, I had the type of job where I thought, if I am not here in the breach, holding this line, the world is going to fall off of its axis. And that was such a painful story. It was a really hard one to get dislodged from. So that's, this is a long story. I can summarize it, but wow, living it was an absolute minefield.
What were those things that sort of drew you closer to the decision? Maybe not, because I know for me, I like the selective amnesia is so on point, right? But what were some of those significant breadcrumbs as you went along and your health failed and you said, there has to be something better, and started turning towards that better?
There's probably 10 things, but if people could only listen to one thing, just one thing, like 30 seconds of a clip, it would be that I had people that were disconnected from that like ecosystem, that people that were not a part of that world, that saw me and loved me and could reflect back to me what they saw happening in my behavior and in my emotional state and in my desires that I was expressing. And I trusted them. And I had multiple people that I loved, that were very dear friends who were in the coaching world, which I ultimately wound up joining. And they told me what they saw. And for a long time, it was enough to know that they had a different opinion about what they saw. Like they came to a different conclusion, that there were these really divergent parts of me that didn't seem to make sense in the way that I was combining them together. And they really held the vision for something different that wasn't just something that I was good at, that I felt like I needed to do, something also that made me happy and didn't require of me every ounce of energy in my body in order to be of service. That phrase, like, I get by with a little help from my friends.
Yes. Yes. And I think what I want to do is just draw back just a tiny bit, because getting that help from your friends would be like, if you're out there and you're lonely, or it feels like you're alone, and no one is supporting you in what your heart is moving you towards, what your spirit, what the whole of your being is screaming at you to draw your attention to, get some help from new friends, because you weren't always a part of that world. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't even find the coaching world until pretty deep into my career. I went to Afghanistan as a civil servant for 6 months in 2011. And I came back in 2012. And when I came back, there was just so much unprocessed difficulty, so much strain, fear, so much stress. And I didn't have the vocabulary at the time to process that. I didn't understand that I couldn't just work anywhere between 12 and 20 hours a day and get attacked by rockets and come back and do anything other than more work. I didn't even realize that I had options. And so there was a real learning curve in terms of my self-awareness. And I did a really extensive amount of professional development in my career. So if you had told me, like, in 2010, maybe, or 2011, early in 2011, because I didn't go to Afghanistan until Veterans Day. But if you had told me, you don't know too much about yourself, lady, I would have been really offended. And in retrospect, I think that there was a really large gap between the sorts of awareness that shows up to help you be more facile and nimble in the corporate type of culture, and the type of deep self-awareness that helps you become whole. And that's what I was missing. And so there was this really intense and expansive journey that I had to go on. And in order to realize that I needed that, I had to get lost in myself first. So I went to Afghanistan, I came back, and I had a really deep anger that was inside of me. And I didn't really realize where it was sourced, that there was anything other than anger, all the way down. Yeah. There's a Terry Pratchett quote about, "You can't fool me, it's turtles all the way down." I just thought it was, anger or turtles all the way down. And at some point through the coach training, which I kind of, auto-magically landed myself in, I just knew that I was so miserable at the time. I was still drinking alcohol, and it took up a large part of my life, my work, and then how I don't even know how to describe it. It was my work took up so much of my life that the like postage stamp size of time that was left, all that I could do was try and recuperate from how angry I was at things not being better. You know, my thought process about the world that I was in at that point was very much oriented towards things that were broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw myself as a fixer. And when you think that everything is broken around you and that you're the person that fixes things, that's not only how you interact with projects and situations, it's also how you treat people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was a long journey, but the tool that really made a game-changing difference was just coming back to my body and understanding that there was a difference between the knowledge that was showing up in my head and the wisdom that was radiating from my body. And I probably would have avoided that if I'd realized like how much change was going to happen. I probably would have like run in the opposite direction. Like, never mind.
It's too much.
I'm good. I'm good.
You know, you said that it emanated and it was turning towards your body that sort of started to open the doorway. And I rephrased that, so correct me if I'm wrong. I recently heard Rick Hansen, who's a neuropsychologist, say you don't wake up as much as you wake down. And that sounded like what you said. Like we run around sort of with the left side of our hemisphere's brain, like running the show and taking the stage. And what I heard you say is you started to wake down, like incorporate the sensing that comes from our body and from the greater mind, spirit and everything of who we are. Is that what I heard you saying?
Yeah, I love that phrase so much. I've got goosebumps all over my body. I've heard it, and it's been like a cajillion years since I've read anything by him. That's so exciting.
He's one of my
to
favorite.
reconnect.
Yeah. I love that phrase that he uses, and he uses it actually to describe his own experience. Right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't waking up for me as much as waking down. And I think a lot of folks resonate with that just because of the culture we live in. And the other thing I heard you say was you were fixing everyone else. And this was more of a turning towards what was inside of you that needed to be not fixed, but just looked at. And was that one of those first steps that you took or first actions, in addition to starting to sense the whole of you, but through that sensing, starting to recognize what you needed and not what everyone else needed from you?
So much so. That's like, if I could give like a little temporary tattoo to all the people that believe that they're really servants at heart and healers, that would be one of them. The most profound thing that you can do for yourself when you want to be like this wellspring of heart and helping and kindness out in the world is to serve from your overflow. I had this wonderful coach that came into my Facebook group last year, 6 months ago, and she said, always serve from your overflow. And that for me, I mean, like, fist pump, high five, write it in capital letters, put it in like 80-degree font, like 80-point font. That has to be where you live from. Otherwise, it's just too easy to descend into this inflamed archetype where you become resentful that other people need you, and you start to define what other people can do by what you can give, which is this really brutal mark against other people's independence and sovereignty. And I recognize that now in retrospect, that I also, in my dominance of the situation, because I had like a very high speed, high achieving career, in my overachieving nature and dominance, I also didn't create space for other people to rise. And I think it's so important. And I see it continuously for people who are coaches that have this really driven energy. They don't ground themselves into what they need. Yeah, it's totally, just writing little notes to send myself back through the time machine.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've heard you said resentful, and I really picked up on that because that's what happens, right? We're doing so much for everyone else, and that resentment, it's like an internal poison when we don't serve from the overflow. I love that phrase.
Yeah, me too. It's such a wonderful visual too.
But even for if you're not in, even if it's towards like a beloved or, in a significant relationship, what I'm thinking right now is when I was in this stage, I thought it was selfish. I thought it was wrong for me to think about what I needed. And now, my life really shows me when I really can tune in to what it is that I actually need, I can get under the rug and find something that fits. It's like this different level of negotiation because there's no give and take, it's give and give. Have you found the same thing?
Yeah, I'm curious if this resonates for you. With me, the other thing that I found in always being on is the way that I have thought of it. Like I never had an off button. I was always in service mode. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I found was that there was there was a darkness inside of me that if I slowed down and came to a halt, there were parts inside of my self, my inner self, and also challenges, deep toxicity and challenges in my personal life that I had to look at. And so there was this bypassing that happened in doing that intense work that was also very gratifying, on a lot of superficial levels. Like, look at me, I work so hard. Look at me and all these achievements. Look at me and I have medals. Woohoo. And there's also, on the flip side, a lot that I was running away from subconsciously, which after a lot of years of personal work, I realize that now, and I respect, because that was what I knew how to do at the time. That version of myself, she was doing the best that she could do, and that's what that looked like.
That did a lot more than resonate. It almost brought me to tears because I lived that life. I think my entire 20s, there was not a 10-minute span of time where I allowed space, where I wasn't moving from one thing to the next. But what I wanted to share, and I've never shared this before in any way publicly, a very, very close loved one in my 30s, I guess, said to me, and I'm probably getting the term wrong. She said, "You're a high functioning drunk." And I was like, "What? Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've done? Do you see all my degrees? Are you kidding me?" But looking back, 15 years later, she was right. I used alcohol to cope because I wasn't ready to look at the things that I needed to look at. And that makes me want to cry. Just like,
I wish I was there to give you a hug.
It's so, but because I know that other people are living that same life right now, right? They're having that third and fourth glass of wine to just get to a point of relax to pass out,
Totally. And the thing that I would offer for people that aren't ready to see that yet, because there are going to be some people that doesn't apply to, and then there's going to be some people that can't meet that because it's too much, because that's the thin line between what they're able to make, to manage, and everything kind of falling apart. What they don't know yet is that it's falling apart, so it can come together in a much better way. But what I would offer is just that addictive patterns and the quality of avoidance that can be so potent when we see it in other people, whether it's drugs or alcohol, something that is socially stigmatized, that can be present anywhere, anywhere. And the relationship with work is a really common and commonly accepted place that it can show up.
Yeah.
So even if you aren't having 3 martinis a night or a bottle and a half of Merlot, there really can be an extraordinary amount of drunkenness and detachment that's sourced in that drunkenness through other activities in your life.
Yeah. And I think for a period of time for me, that was probably exercise. It was 2 to 4 hours of exercise a day.
Yeah. So for anybody who's going through this space, I want to also offer a tool. And it's just the question of, what's going on right now. Whether it's you're getting up at 4:30 to go to work, or you're getting ready to crack open another bottle of wine, or, it's your like 6th red eye of the day. You don't have to stop it. I'm not saying stop it, but the tool that I would give you is just what else is going on when you're getting ready to do that. And I've found that asking that question starts to excavate in an extraordinary way. There's like continents that are uncovered, and I don't know if you had anything like that, but I try to make sure that I offer that up to other people, because it's not something that we're taught, and yet it seems like such like a vital part of like a basic human operating system. By the way, fact check, like make sure that what your brain is telling you to do is like the actual agenda.
Exactly. Well, and I want to go back to your point about thinking you had self-awareness when you didn't have that deep self-awareness. I was in the same place, right? Like years and years of quote unquote work through books and courses and retreats and you name it. But for some reason and I think we're always blind to a certain level. We can't see and feel everything because it's just too much. But what I heard you saying also in that tool, in that offering, is kind of the shift in direction that I see both in myself and then the folks that I work with, is that pointing to someone else, right? You can see clearly what's wrong with them or what they need to change, and just turning towards what's inside of you that needs attention. What you said is what's going on, but also what's going on with me. Yeah. Right? An awareness of the context without wanting to change it or fix it, but also an awareness of, and what's inside of me. A tool that I've used recently, because I was like, what's going on? was the word wait.
It just brings to mind that at the time when I was in that career, there was also a tremendous amount of hesitancy and withholding that happened because I had a very elevated security clearance, and I was extremely wary of having anything that looks like therapy that would be something that would be reportable or that would be concerning in any sort of like future investigation. So in a lot of ways, coming into the coaching world was like this back door that I didn't even know existed. Because while coaching is completely different from therapy, there's a real absence of deep listening in our culture. And as like contemporary humans, listening is not a skill that we cultivate, even though it really should be a part of like the basic operating system. And I had such revelations that came out of people hearing me, coaches, other practitioners hearing me, and then reflecting back to me where there was dissonance. It was wildly powerful. And it really was something that helped me move forward without having that deep wariness around therapy needing to be addressed.
That's a really good point. You said reflection. And for folks who don't have someone, if you're out there and you feel alone, like your journal could be a reflective tool. It's anything that provides a mirror, right? We are relational, and our thinking is relational. So you have to relate to someone. And if you're relating to yourself, you need something to bounce it from. So it could be your journal. But what you said, Steph, I just want to remind everyone, like, if the world is falling apart, find a world that is creating for you. Find those friends that are going to help you, and like, just start to look for them, and they'll show up. And it can be you friending yourself through your journal as a first step.
Yeah, journals are great spaces. Any place where there's an absence of productivity, I think, is a space where, if you believe in God, your guides can come through. If you aren't in that space, or you believe in something else or something intangible, your inner wisdom can come forward. There's all sorts of great books out there about using your dreams to incubate solutions to problems. And there's even one that I heard recently. This guy was quoting someone that was talking about dreams as the best life coach that you could ever have, which I loved, because I get like random solutions in my dreams all the time, but you have to go to bed with that stated intention, and also give yourself space in the morning before you, lock eyes with your phone. But there's so many potential outlets, even if you are like isolated in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's outlets, like even if you're in the depths of a submarine, and it's just a matter of opening up to that space where you don't know what's going to happen, or you're not trying to be efficient or productive, and engaging in a listening and in a watching and awareness. Art is really good for this too.
So yes, art, definitely. I love art, but the idea of not being productive, say more.
Yeah. So there's this like really powerful integration that happens when we are not doing. It's kind of like the metaphor of music is made by the spaces in between the notes.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really powerful integration that happens, and an awareness that builds in. So this kind of goes back to the comments about the brain and the mind. There are a lot of preconceived notions which are just 1,000% off base. They're really, like modern science has caught up, and then common culture really hasn't. So, whether it's about people being fused with their thoughts or fused with their identity, they think that they are that which is thinking instead of the observer that sees the thinking, or pick another, pick another false belief. There's so many ways that we don't support ourselves by engaging, by believing these false things. And one of them is just this idea that our conscious brain does all the work. And there's all different sorts of science. I'm really curious about these kinds of things and fascinated by it. Like, for instance, scientists are discovering that when we go to sleep, it's kind of like windshield wipers for our brain. There's all sorts of amazing chemicals that are being washed out. So we go through this detox, and we do it every night. And that's one of the reasons why sleep is so important. So the power of our subconscious, and the primacy of it, and the proportionality between our conscious thinking and our subconscious thinking is probably way divergent from what people expect it to be. If it's just based off of the conversations that I have with, folks that have no relationship with the coaching world, or worlds that have like deep inquiry, I'd say people are probably expecting it's like 90% conscious brain. And in actuality, it's probably more like 10 or 15%. Like, there's this incredible density to our subconscious brain, and it has such power. And yet, for so many people, we don't think of it that way. We think like, oh, well, we're thinking these thoughts, so we have to respond to them. I mean, how many
like emails, right?
times
It's an emergency SOS.
Yeah. I mean, like so many examples. There's a difference between what we're feeling and how we have to respond, and what we're thinking and what we do in the world, and there's so much about our subconscious brain and about the outer world that we don't understand, and yet there's like a hubris that happens where we think we know. And that certainty is really dangerous.
Oh my God. Yeah, that certainty is dangerous. On the idea of, where you were citing facts, the most, and I'm going to look it up and try to put it in the show notes, but the research that I read recently actually gave it a 98% versus 2%. So our conscious awareness is 2% of what we can see, and our subconscious is 98%. And I was like, wow. So it's crazy, right? It's like flipping the switch on stuff.
Yeah. And when I think about how many people, mostly in my former career, that would dismiss intuition, I mean, my God, regardless of whether or not you think that there's a benevolent author and there's something else that's out there, just that sheer amount of weight of the subconscious alone, like let your subconscious mind connect the dots and then effing listen.
Right. And like you said, it's like science has these breakthroughs that contemporary culture hasn't caught up with. And one of the things that I keep being drawn back to about the science is that we are a complex system that is self-organizing, right? And so from a logical standpoint, if that could be intuition. We're self-organizing. We're figuring it out within ourselves. And that has nothing to do with woo-woo. That's just like the science of it. But yeah, we really need to catch up with what science really does say. Because I heard someone say, if you actually understood the impact of Einstein's theory of something else, not relativity, but quantum physics, right? If you really got quantum physics, you'd move through the world in a completely different way. So,
yes, all the yeses. Did you read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you notice there was a chapter in his book on Einstein time?
I read it a few years ago, so I don't remember.
Okay. Mine is a more recent pass, so I'll summarize. Okay. This chapter in the book is like, it's almost like some part of him snuck another book inside of it, which if you haven't read The Big Leap, it's fantastic. It talks about hidden upper limit barriers. It's absolutely amazing. But Einstein time is all about this idea that you are the point of creation of time. And so scarcity of time is this falsehood that you're repeating to yourself over and over again that does you no service and is actually factually inaccurate. It's fantastic. When I read it, I was like, great, now I need to go like read, Stephen Hawking and Michio Kaku and like go back into the popular science section because my quantitative background doesn't support that. But I was like, yes.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, by the way, he just came out with a new book, Your Zone of Genius, I think it's called. So I'm excited to, he hadn't written, I think, anything significant since The Big Leap. And this is the next one. So for folks who are resonating with that, definitely look for The Big Leap and his latest book, The Zone of Genius.
And if you are an audio learner, or if you just have like a really long commute, I highly recommend it on audio.
Because you're listening to a podcast.
Well, some people can do it for short periods of time. I want to say his book might have been like 6 or 7 hours. I was listening to it when I drove across America, but his voice is the most soothing thing. Yeah. It's this like really powerful transmission. It's fantastic.
Well, and it comes back to your what you said about the sound in between, right? There's a resonance that's happening under our awareness with his voice that's probably adding to the actual words, because words are concepts. But so I want to go back to the thing that you said about repeating, because we've been sort of on a neuroscience kick, right? Sort of on the down low. One of the things I sort of take it for granted that I know, so I want to repeat it out loud. When you said that something is repeating and repeating and it's not serving you to repeat it, it's also deepening that circuit in your brain. So if your brain is like, if you're saying, I'm not a morning person, something really simple and easy, right? And you say that over and over, that curb that you're having to jump and over time, kind of like the Grand Canyon, becomes this huge like abyss that you can't cross. So that's another sort of tool, I guess, based on what you said, Steph, that I want to offer our listeners is just notice what you're repeating to yourself and whether or not it's something that you're repeating to serve you, something that you're creating or proud of, right? Or it's something that you're trying to move away from.
Oh my goodness. Yes. yes. And yes again.
Yeah.
There's this anecdote. There was a jazz singer. Sometimes I'm the worst at remembering these anecdotes. There was a jazz singer who had gone on tour, and this was in the 50s, I think. And the story goes that one of her songs had in it the lyric, "I'm so tired." It might have been Ella Fitzgerald. I'm the worst at remembering some of the details in these anecdotes unless I repeat them, and they're not in my personal experience. But she came back after the tour was over, after like 6 months of singing the song, which was a hit of hers. And she had what would be like the modern equivalent of adrenal fatigue. Like they were trying to figure out what was going wrong with her. And it was like, oh, right, you're giving your subconscious this command
to be tired.
Is just, over and over and over again. And to my own credit, prior version of myself would not have realized how much power is in that. I would have deemed the power of the subconscious mind as something that was a little bit out there, as opposed to backed by leading edge science. And I would have resisted that until I saw it really in play with lots of different people. And I think if you're in a space where you're just getting into this world, that's one of the places where you can test without any, fear of whiplash or anything going wrong, is just start to improve your self-talk and really be specific about how you treat yourself and the way that you use your language. Because my inner dialogue was not a nice person.
Yeah. Anne Lamott says my brain is a bad neighborhood nobody wants to go to, or something like that. But, this is, this thread, one of the things that I love about truth is that it's true everywhere. And I recall, because I have grown men, they're 22 or 23 and 27. They're old, but they're so old. That doesn't make me old at all, by the way. I'm so young and vibrant.
Time isn't real. Just read Einstein.
Yeah, read Einstein. And if you guys don't know this, but before we started the recording, that's exactly what Steph and I agreed to. She goes, and I'm like, time is irrelevant. So,
circle,
right? Circle. So when I was learning to raise my boys, because that's one thing that I wanted to get right. And so I read exhaustively about parenting and how to parent and what to do. My poor kids, poor guys. But one of the things that really sunk in is exactly what you just said, is this idea of framing things in the positive. Even to this day, if I know they're traveling, I say drive safe, because that's positive. everything in that phrase is getting to the intention that I'm holding for them. Drive safe, right? It's not saying don't speed, because our brains, again, with the neuroscience, don't process the negative. They don't process the don't. They just pick up on the speed. So I do that very intentionally with my children, grown men, when I'm just like very careful of the language, because it's so important to me. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I can't do it for myself, do it for the people you love. Test it on them, because you're doing test it on the people you love. Don't test it on cats. I'm babysitting a cat. She doesn't listen to anything I say, no matter how I say it. So, right, Maggie? She's right here by my shoulder. So, but I threw you off a little bit. I might have thrown you off a little bit, Steph.
Well, no, I was just thinking, like, this entire time we've been having a third-party conversation. I had to take a moment and be like, I wonder what the cat thinks of all of this. If like, as we're talking about this, she's like, well, duh, time's not real. Like, catch up.
Yeah, she's not interested in my life at all. I'll just tell you that. There are peaks of curiosity occasionally, but most of all, it's her world, and I'm just running around in it. But wow. And you know what I love about talking to you is that we've been able to have a conversation with each other, but you and I have directly, like, we've also talked directly to whoever has this in their earbuds, right? The men and women, that are saying, how do I do this? How do I get this right? It's so freaking scary right now. I don't even know where to start. So I just want to thank you for dancing with me that way.
Yeah. Could we give them a pep
Totally.
talk?
Go for it.
Okay. So it's a pep talk that as long as you're not driving, I would like you to do with your hand over your heart. So dominant hand. Because my hand is on my heart, and I want to radiate some energy out towards you, some good vibes. As the woo-woo person says to the potentially non-woo-woo listeners. A long, long time ago, in a faraway place, there was a version of myself who could only operate by fear and concern about how much worse things could be, not how much better they could be. And I'm sending this note out to her in addition to you. You have no idea how good it's going to get. You have no idea what potential landscapes will open, because none of the things that are in your life right now could possibly add up, whether it's in addition or any other form of mathematical equations that we haven't discovered yet. It could never add up to this. None of the logic that you have inside of your very sharp, capable, and clever head could ever sum up to the magic and miracles that are happening in your future. And that's a good thing. And it's a hard thing, because it means that you've got to upgrade your faith. And you are a person who's going to have a lot of faith. And whether or not faith in anything outside of you is something that you're ready to open up to, I want you right away to open up to having an intense level of devotion and commitment and faith in yourself, because you're worth it. And this future version of you is worth it. You can do this, and I believe in you, and I will hold the vision until you get there. You might think that you're doing it alone, and you might cry, and you might get angry, and I encourage you to feel all of the feelings on your way to come to me, but you're going to be okay. It's going to be way, way better than okay. But what you need to know right now is that it's going to be okay.
Thank you. I want to do the same thing. So this is to my younger self, and to I guess whoever resonates with it. I don't even know how to address it. But what I was scared most of back then is that I was going to break something or leave something and it be the wrong decision. But what I want to tell you, both you, the greater you, and myself, because it's my experience, you can't imagine how good it's going to get. Like you couldn't have imagined how good it's going to get. And nothing physically has changed, but everything is different. So doing what's right for you doesn't mean you're walking away from anything or closing anything down. I think I have a different car, but it's actually the same car of different year. Nothing really physically has changed. Some of the people in my life have changed, right? But you can't imagine how good it's going to get. And that's the intention that I hold for you, is that you do slow down, start to look at what you need, listen to what you say, listen to what you say, just listen to what you say. And you are brave. You are already brave because you're listening to this and you're listening to Steph and I. And if Steph and I can do it, you can do it. So it's gonna get so good. And until it's so good, it's not over yet. That's my message.
All the amens.
Right? Oh my gosh.
And I, in all of my sharpness and clever capacity, I never could have forecasted that my answers would have rested in that space of slowing down. I love that. Another temporary tattoo.
Yeah. Goodness, so much beautiful goodness. Steph, tell everyone where they can find you if they want to know more about you or just connect with you.
Yeah, so I hang out a lot on social media, which is hilarious because, for OPSEC purposes, I never had a Facebook account. I didn't get onto Facebook until 2014, and then I was worried about counterintelligence services. I hang out a lot on Facebook, and I'm at facebook.com/Steph.Lagana, which is my last name, Lagana. Sounds kind of like lasagna if you haven't eaten lunch or dinner. And if you are not hungry, then it makes no sense whatsoever. I'm on Instagram, which I love. And I also have a Facebook group. I specifically focus on entrepreneurs, usually women. And my Instagram handle, as the kids say, and my Facebook group are both Your Sacred Craft, because I'm working with people who aren't just building a business. They are aligning themselves with a calling.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for aligning yourself, for your service in the world, for our conversation. I have so much hand over heart gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so happy we got to connect today, my dear. I'm really grateful that some part of you and I both got to this point. Just beaming love back to both of those versions of ourselves back in the past.
Yeah, beaming love to our past selves, grinning ear to ear at our future selves, and just giving hugs to everyone out there who's looking for the tools that we've just shared with them.
Yeah.
If something needs to change and you don't quite know what it is yet, tune in and turn inward. I host an online learning community where we can figure it out together. It feels like a little family, and it's a place where you can be supported and offer support, because togetherness sparks change. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more.